All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live broadcast of the Women's Professional Ministry Directory. My name is Kristen. I am the mentoring coordinator of the Women's Clergy Network. We are so excited to be interviewing two phenomenal women currently in ministry tonight. Angel, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Angel Smith. I'm a second-year seminarian here at Andrews University, and I am the treasurer for the Women's Clergy Network. And I'm really excited for tonight. We have two very special guests, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first guest. Her name is Pastor Anna Bennett, and she is currently the chaplain at Southern Adventist University. So welcome, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, ladies. This is awesome. So glad to be here tonight.
It's a pleasure. So I'll just start us. We'll just go straight to the first question.
Sure.
So the first question that we have for you, Pastor Anna, is how did you get involved in ministry?
Yeah, man. So such a loaded question. I had to sit and think about that a little bit this week as I was thinking about our interview tonight. I think it all really began for me, though, watching both of my parents, Fran and April Rumwald, who are in Minnesota currently. They always have had such a tenacious love for Jesus. They've had a personal conviction and love for him, and that was instilled in our family. I watched them be active in church growing up, everywhere from leading at the back of the church in the AV sound booth to leading out Daniel and Revelation Bible studies, to my mom being an HUD elder, both of them being highly involved in building a church school at our church at the time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, Pathfinders, so much. And I think doing ministry alongside of them, growing up as a child and into my youth and young adult years, helped to instill a love for Jesus in my own life personally. And then in high school, I was headed in one direction, and Jesus came after me for about a year as I ran away and finally discovered that he was calling me to pastoral ministry. And I bargained with him a little bit and just said, listen, do you know what pastoral ministry is all about, Jesus? As if he didn't know. Do you know what it's like to be a woman in ministry, Jesus? They say that you've experienced everything, but I don't know if you've experienced this. And just really came down to, if you're really calling me to ministry, then you have to make a way, because I have the impression that there are going to be times and moments in ministry where there may not always be a way. So I need you to be that way maker for me. And it was a done deal after that. I decided to go all in. I ended up going to Union College, where I vowed never to go at the time. And that's where Jesus commonly takes us, is to the places we don't want to go. But I fell in love with it quickly. I took an undergraduate in theology with an emphasis in youth ministry. And after quite a bit of struggle, but I won't belabor that portion of the story, in waiting to find where God might be calling me to go in ministry, being told that in the Mid-America Union at the time, there was maybe a handful of positions where women in ministry would be accepted. There was zero budget to hire any new pastors at the time that I graduated as well. And so it felt like a no. It felt like God had brought me all of this way and then said, shucks, sorry. And I didn't have much faith, but the faithfulness of God persists in moments when we needed him the most, it seems like. And he already had steps laid out for me. So I accepted a call to the Minnesota Conference and actually got to serve in the church that I watched my parents minister in, the church that I got to grow up in. And my love and fondness for that church, being my first church, is just deep. It runs really deep. And couple of years later, after being able to serve in that capacity as an assistant associate pastor rather. God called me to Southern Adventist University, and I've been here now for 7 years. So the journey has not been without challenge, but it's always been exciting to partner with God, to take Jesus by the hand and see where he will lead.
I appreciate you sharing your story and your journey, Pastor Anna, because there was some questioning and some doubts about whether or not this was what you wanted to do. And God provided a way for you to do ministry when you may have thought that there were now no open doors. And so it's amazing to see how God is leading us into the path and the purpose that he's called us to. And so thank you also for sharing your educational journey and being able to see those different elements of how your background now fits into your current ministry. But we want to be able to learn more about your ministry and leadership experience. What were some of the positions and responsibilities that you held growing up, maybe in high school and in college, that really prepared you to be that pastor and now the chaplain that you are?
Wow. I think some of the things that stand out for me is specifically in high school. So I attended Maplewood Academy in Minnesota. And for several years, I felt strongly that I wanted to be involved in something. I pursued different offices in student association and whatnot, and nothing ever panned out for me. I really thought that I would probably go my entire high school career without really ever being in a leadership role. At some point, that was kind of my determination. And then my chaplain came alongside of me at the time. He taught our Bible classes and a couple of other things and was always available and accessible for us for all of our spiritual questions. And he had played a big role in my life already. But he came alongside of me at the end of my junior year and said, "We want you to be our campus ministries coordinator next year." So from like 0 to 100 overnight. And I said, "You've got the wrong girl for this. I think I really need like an intermediary step, something in between those two. I don't feel like going all the way from 0 to 100. And he said, "No, you need to do it. And I'm going to be here." And okay. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Unfortunately, that chaplain actually left at the end of that school year. And so I was alone throughout the summer as we were making plans, and into the next year. We had a brand new chaplain step in. And so there was a lot of needing to even catch them up to speed. And I remember throughout the course of that year feeling a little duped. Not necessarily by my chaplain, because I felt so humbled and honored that I had been asked to step into that role, but duped by God that he would open up this opportunity and then leave me to figure things out with the network of people who were there to support me, but to do it alone, kind of. And it taught me so much about leaning together, leaning on one another in our campus ministries team. That transpired and kind of led into my college experience. My chaplain and now good friend and colleague, Rich Carlson, one way or another, also pulled me into campus ministries while I was at Union. And it was an incredible opportunity to be mentored by him and other student leaders. And I really believe it's because of his mentorship and the mentorship of some highly esteemed professors and individuals at Union that's really the reason why I'm here today. Their mentorship and leadership in my whole and total person, not just as a minister, really led me to where I am today. So I've always been involved in campus ministries and didn't know that it would lead me to be a chaplain so early in ministry, but I wouldn't trade what I'm doing now for the world. I love it.
Yeah, I think it's really cool to see how God, he opens doors and amazing timing. You know, God is right on time sometimes, even when we think, oh, this is not working. And it seems like not only did he open doors for you right on time, but he also trained and equipped you along the way, you know, where you feel it's oh, I feel inept, I can't do this, but God, so I love that idea of God, just equipping us during our time and doubts and allowing us to shine. And one thing I wanted to shine a light on, I want our viewers to also hear about is the MAPMAN program that you're a part of. So I think that's a key piece of the educational journey, because this has allowed you to continue in ministry while getting educated as well. And I think if there are people are in who are out there who may think, oh, I can't, I'm too busy now, or I'm already involved in ministry, I can't stop and pause, I have a family, and so there's no way I can just drop everything and go to Andrews and get my MDiv. There's this opportunity. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I believe so strongly that your lack of education, my lack of education, is never a boundary or a hurdle or an obstacle, a mountain that God cannot move in order to put you in the right places and to provide financially and otherwise for us to be able to get the education we need, to be able to serve in capacities with the highest degree of experience and exceptionalness. That's not really a word, but where God has led me to. So right at the end of my journey at Southview in the Minnesota conference, when God called me to Southern, I was just about ready to transition into the seminary because I had been in ministry for a few years and an opening had been created so that I could go to the seminary. However, when I accepted the call to come to Southern, that opening was put on hold, and I transitioned fully into chaplaincy here. And so I've been waiting for a little bit of time for God to open up the doors at the right time. And now in the last year and a half, I've been involved in the MAPMAN program, which is the Master's in Pastoral Ministry through Andrews University. And so I'm actually taking classes right now remotely, but typically we travel to different union locations closest to us. And we participate in a couple of weeks of intensives and take our classes throughout the semester. So it's allowed me to continue to stay in ministry. I don't have to uproot. I don't have to ask my husband to uproot and move his business and transition our lives to another place. I'm so deeply grateful that the MAPMAN program is available. I believe it's serving as a bridge to other educational opportunities and callings that God has for me in the future as well, to continue to be able to do my job well.
There was one particular thing you mentioned in your story that I also wanted to touch on, was the chaplain that came alongside you. And sometimes God sends people.
Yes.
And he uses people to speak to us. And so so we have that, that moment where, you were in need of that. He comes alongside and starts to guide you. And now you're a chaplain. So I'm wondering for you, what is your purpose? What are your current ministry endeavors?
The best way that I can say it, I would probably narrow it down to two things. My first calling, the reason why I'm here, is for each individual person who comes into my office, each student and employee on our campus, to be able to experience Jesus personally, to have a personal relationship with him. And sometimes we take a really direct route. Sometimes we walk a long journey with students to help them to see a need for Jesus, to understand how to have a relationship with Jesus personally, not one that's just the church's relationship with Jesus or just their parents' relationship with Jesus, but how do I have a relationship with Jesus? That's the first thing. I think secondly, the reason why I'm in this role now and the purpose that God has placed on my heart is to be a way maker for others. So my husband and I, we've been following the election process, right? And seeing Kamala Harris elected into Vice President-elect of the United States of America. She's in the second highest position of leadership, authority, and power pretty much in the world, the way that we look at the United States of America. And I turned to him on Saturday night while we were watching the acceptance speeches and just thought, wow, it's time for our church to do this too. I believe that it is my role, like God is calling me and equipping me and walking beside me to work myself out of a job so that women can follow behind me. You're going to hear from Darnisha. We've had the privilege to serve in the exact same church at different times. That's a huge blessing. I'm so grateful that God has been able to work out our stories that way. There are other young women, other young men who have sat in my office who I've been able to have the privilege and honor of serving alongside. They're going to take my job someday soon. God's going to call me to another place, and they will have been equipped by God and his Spirit to do exactly what I do here and so much more. Our world needs radical, courageous, confident, bold, brave leaders in our day and age today. And it's my purpose and my calling, I believe, to invest in them today so they can change our world.
I think that's so valuable, to invest in and empower the people that are coming to take your role. And I think that's so important. We need more mentors. We need more people who can invest in the one-on-one. I hear you say that you really appreciate the time where students can come to your office and get that individualized attention. Can you also speak to some of your specific skills and gifts that you have in ministry that really allow you to live out the calling that God has for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so some of my strengths, as God has been developing and shaping me over time, include being a learner, being able to connect the big picture with different patterns that I see and hear about, being able to empathize. So one of the things I love to do the most is to be able to listen to people's stories, to ask really good questions, and to get to the root of the issue in all of our heart. There's always a root problem, and there's a root wound in all of our lives that God really wants to sink his teeth into and see his power transform. And so being able to work one-on-one with students is probably my area of specialty, and that's better said probably as mentorship and discipleship, being able to walk alongside students as they develop in their faith and journey with God. I also support the small groups ministry on our campus. We have a team of 22 student leaders actually, who take this same approach that I've been talking about, being able to mentor and disciple others. And they support probably 80 to 100 student leaders every year who lead out in a small group ministry. So we're developing and training one section of leaders to be able to support a larger section of leaders, and the ability to serve as a mentor and disciple maker in that realm, and also speak into the idea of community and belonging, a place within a small group where people can unpack their identity in Christ and determine their purpose for life and for living in Christ. That's some of my most favorite things to do.
You mentioned when you started off that you one of your strengths is learning. What I would like to do to close this out is to ask you to leave us with some wisdom from your experience. If you can just share a message of encouragement with us to close here.
I'll start with this. It's actually in Isaiah 41, verse 8 is where I'll start. God is speaking through his prophet, and what's written down for us is this: "But you, Israel, my servant." You could even read this and insert your name. You, Kristen, you, Angel, you, Anna, my servant, whom I have chosen. Skipping ahead to verse 10, you are my servant, I have chosen you and not cast you off. Fear not, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand.
Amen.
God has called you. Since God has called you, there is nothing that will stand in his way for him making a way for you to serve in the capacities that he's called you to serve in. And because God is going to be your maker, your way maker, he's calling you to make a way for those who will come behind you. So the question is, not only are you called to serve in ministry, to be a fantastic preacher, to be an excellent small group pastor, yada, 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 whatever you want, God has called you to leave a legacy of ministry that will live on in those who've come behind you and continue to change the world when we have fallen short. So taking a look at what is ahead of you and what God has called you to, and being confident of your calling as you continue to embrace it day by day, and looking over your shoulder and recognizing who's following you, because that's exactly who God is calling to take your place.
Amen. Amen. That was a word. I'm looking forward to hearing more of you and being able to really share your stories with other women. Where can people find you? I imagine that there are those who are listening right now who are saying, I want to reach out to Pastor Anna. I want to be mentored. I want to be discipled. I want more of her wisdom. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram and Twitter. You can find me on Instagram probably much more actively than any other platform. I recently watched The Social Dilemma and I took myself off of Facebook. So if you're looking for me there, you may not find me. But you can find me on Instagram, and don't hesitate to reach out and let me know how I can come alongside of you. Ministry is not something to do alone. It's something best experienced in community. So I'm happy to help however I can and to receive a blessing from any of you as well.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time in being interviewed. And you heard it from Pastor Anna directly. Please reach out to her on Instagram and Twitter. She's chaplain at Southern Adventist University. Thank you so much again, Pastor Anna. We're going to take a quick break, but please come back because we have Pastor Darnisha Thomas.
Hello, my name is D. London Anderson, and I am the president of the Women's Clergy Network here at Andrews University for the 2020 through 2021 school year. Along with our treasurer, Angel Smith, our communications coordinator, Sandra Stabine, and our mentoring coordinator, Kristen Thomas. And this year's team, that's right, this year's team has an exciting new initiative that I would like to tell you more about. Are you ready? It is the Women's Professional Ministry Directory. The Women's Professional Ministry Directory is a video-based ministry that will provide female and male students pursuing ministry with the opportunity to identify potential mentoring and networking relationships, while also providing inspiration and affirmation in their ministry calling. The directory may also be used by church members and community leaders who are seeking the ministry of powerful and gifted women that are currently walking in their calling. Each directory entry is a video of a dedicated Christian woman sharing their past experiences, educational background, ministry expertise, and interests. These women will include pastors, chaplains, and even those that are dedicated to ministry while they are functioning in their varying career fields. If this is you, if you fit into that category of a pastor, a chaplain, or a woman who's dedicated to ministry, and you're walking in that calling, even though you may be in a different career field, I ask that you please email us at wcn@andrews.edu. We will respond to you with more information and instructions on how to record and upload your directory entry. Also, for those of you who are saying, number one, I'm not a woman, or number two, I'm not necessarily, I don't necessarily fit within those categories, we still have a task for you. Please share this. Share this with women that have been inspirational to you in your life. Share this with pastors, with ministry leaders, with chaplains, that within your local context across the globe, so that they will also have the opportunity to be a part of this video directory. Again, our email is wcn@andrews.edu. And this is how you may get in contact with us to gain more information about what it is that we're looking for and how to upload your video or their video.
Welcome back to part 2 of our live interviews today. We just heard from Pastor Anna Bennett, chaplain at Southern Adventist University, and she really inspired us to not only pave the path for those coming behind us, but to also look forward as God is continuing to lead us. And we have another dynamic pastor that is going to be on this show, so I'll let Angel introduce her.
I'm so excited to introduce this pastor here. Her name is Pastor Darnisha Thomas. You heard a little bit from Anna's story, but Pastor Darnisha Thomas is actually a part of, in some ways a part of Anna Bennett's journey, because she is now located and pastoring where Pastor Anna Bennett once was. So that's a really cool story to see how those two connect. Pastor Darnisha Thomas is the pastor of Southview Seventh-day Adventist Church, and we would just like to welcome you, and we're so glad you're here.
Thank you, ladies, for having me.
Yes, thank you.
So we'll get straight to it, just like with Pastor Anna Bennett. Our first question for you is, how did you get involved in ministry?
Mm-hmm. So I have always been in ministry since I was young, like I want to say fourth grade year. I was always that kid at church growing up. I've always wanted to help, whether it be with the kids, whether it be in the kitchen, passing bread, serving bread. I was that kid. I was that church kid growing up. My parents, they were really active in our church. My dad was a deaconess. My mom was a deaconess. And so that's all I knew was church. Then my dad became the community service coordinator for our church. So I had like that behind the scenes, and that's how I kind of had that passion for serving people outside of, outside the church walls. And yeah, I've done almost everything. I was a children's usher. I was in the children's choir, youth choir, you name it. And I'm a product of Adventist education. So from kindergarten till seminary, that's all I knew was Adventist education. And I've always wanted to be a chaplain in my school, like in elementary school, middle school, high school, but I kept losing the elections over and over again, man. It was like Biden, but anyways, it was just, at the end of the day, I just said, God, you know what, you got me. Used me in a powerful way. And I was serving in my high school year. That's how the calling to ministry became real. Became stronger. I avoided being a pastor or wanting to be a pastor when I was in 7th grade. I was like, hey, maybe I get it. No, I'm not going to do that. It's too much work. But I've always had that passion for ministry. Just from always I was that Bible nerd. I still am unapologetic, but I look really good as a Bible nerd. So, but yeah, I've always had this sensitivity of spirituality during that time. And it wasn't until I was 16 where the calling got stronger. And I was like, I'm not going to be a pastor. I don't want to be a pastor. And there was a time when I wanted to be a pastor, and my family was like, how you going to get paid? So I was conflicted. I kept crying. I kept going up front during altar call because, like, God, I don't know. Like, I want to serve you, but I don't know. Like, I don't want to disappoint my parents. So I eventually just, I prayed about it, and, I still continue to serve God as best as possible. But I did win an election. I was the choir chaplain, my youth choir. So actually, it was my youth choir that kind of showed that I had a passion for preaching. They asked me to preach for an anniversary back home in Maryland, and it was like, all of a sudden, I just felt so overwhelmed, and I was just like, wow, God, like you can use somebody like me. So yeah, 16, my mother told me, she read one of my journals, and she was about to go through a surgery that day. And she said she needed to read what I read, what I wrote in that journal, that particular journal for that time. And, we had a cry fest. And I went to my room and I just started sobbing, a 16-year-old girl sobbing in her bedroom, and just said, God, I'm just so overwhelmed, but whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. That was just me saying, fine, God, I'll do it. Like, a better way than to surrender than being on your knees and crying, doing that ugly cry. So afterwards, I got through there, went to, just got exposed to so much aspect of ministry, children's ministries, youth ministries, doing vacation Bible school, doing camps for like day camps and stuff. So that was how I got involved in ministry, just as a young person.
I appreciate that because, you had the desire and you didn't give up. Many would say, I've not been elected. God, this must not be your calling for me. But you stuck with it. And God continued to reveal your gifts and your skills. And so as you're transitioning out of high school, can you share with us your educational journey of how God has led you academically to where you are right now?
So after high school, I ended up doing a bachelor's of arts in theology at Oakland University. So shout out to OU. You see my trying to figure out which way to point, because there we are, right there. So there's my diploma, my BA in theology, and minor in biblical languages. So it was that was an interesting experience for me. I was still trying to find myself. I didn't really get into that firsthand relationship with God until I went to Oakwood. And it's like, once when you leave home, it's like you realize, when the rubber hits the road, it's like, hey, are you owning up to this faith, or is this based on the faith of my parents or of my leaders? So during that time, I just asked God to just be Lord over my life. I said, God, I know you as my savior, but I need you to be Lord over my life. So from that experience, I did a couple of ministries. I was serving as an assistant to the religious vice president for 2 years. Like 1 year after, well, it's like in between 2 years. So I was able to do that and help plan events and doing campus prayer activities and just being active, doing morning worships for our dorm. So like, some of the ladies might be half asleep during that time. So I've done that. And I was a Greek tutor, lab instructor during my time at Oakwood. And so that was an interesting experience. So after I graduated from Oakwood, I decided to take a gap year. So instead of me going straight to seminary, I wanted to go straight to seminary, but there was so much that was happening at Oakwood. And I just felt so burnt out. And I just said, I need to take a break. And I was helping my dad with a small business, and then I was working in an office in Bowie. And I was quite miserable because I saw all my theology friends out at Andrews having the time of their lives. And I'm just like, man, I need to be out there. I need to be out there and serve. And I was still doing ministry during my time. I was helping out my church with youth ministries and adventurers. And it got to the point that I became comfortable. I became really comfortable. Like my auntie was telling me, like, why do you want to go back to school now. You have a decent paying job. But I was like, okay, maybe she's right. Maybe I can just do something here. Maybe this is where God has called me. But it got to the point, and I already signed up for seminary. I was already registered for seminary. Well, enrolled. Well, not enrolled, but I've already applied for seminary. And I was supposed to get in. I kept deferring my application, and I made sure, okay, August of 2013, that's when I'm going to seminary. And all of a sudden, before I even resigned, I was told to resign from my job. So it wasn't like they were firing me. They knew that I was leaving, but they wanted to have somebody to fill in for me. So by the time I'm gone, there's already somebody there, instead of them like, oh my gosh, we got to look for an admin assistant or HR assistant. And yeah, it was shocking. So it was hard for me to tell my parents, like, okay, I was told I need to quit my job, but I hadn't got accepted to Andrews yet. So it was quite nerve-wracking. My parents were giving me grief. A couple other people that were giving me grief, like, you should have gotten accepted by now. I have friends getting accepted to Andrews, and I'm like, where is my acceptance letter? Like, and then people told me, well, maybe you're not going to be accepted. I was like, Andrews declined those applications like that? So I was nervous. I was really, really nervous. And so I resigned at the end of May, and I said, okay, God, this is going to be hard. It's going to be really hard. I don't know if I'm even going to be accepted. So I don't know what's going to happen if I don't get accepted, but I'm trusting your plan. I know that you called me to this ministry. And just 2 weeks later, I got a phone call, June 3rd, my mom's birthday, that I got accepted. And I was just so floored to see how God worked out in that way. And, you know, God was able to work things out with housing and providing me with my first car through my parents, thankfully. And that's how I got through with seminary. And seminary has been the best experience for me because I learned so much about myself. I began to own up. Fully own up to God. And it was like a Ruth experience. Like, you know, I felt like I left behind so much and just became a whole different person. And I loved everything I did. The Cuba study tour in 2015. God literally, it was just like a way that God was telling me that I'm calling you for this ministry. And from that, just doing TFE at the Grace Place Church. Shout out to Mama Hyman there. And it, you know, just learning from her, learning from other of my colleagues, and just helping me through that experience, I knew that God called me to Andrews. And I grew a lot during that time at Andrews. So I'm grateful for that. I did have my moments where I wanted to give up altogether. I did fail like at least 2 classes, and I was on academic probation. But nevertheless, I was still encouraged to just keep on going, just at the end of the day. And just the fact that I was able to leave Andrews with a 3.0 GPA is a blessing. So I'm like, okay, I'm locked in for the doctorate program, God. I know that you had your ways for me. And it's like, God always looks out. You know, God always provides. And that's something that I learned during that time. It's just having that full dependence on God during that season.
Wow. So you just said you're in a doctorate program.
No, not yet. I'm still trying to figure out where exactly God's going to lead in that doctorate program, but that is in the game plan. Cool.
One thing I really love about your story is just that personal experience you described at Oakwood.
Mm-hmm.
How there was something different there in that experience. You really took on this relationship God as your own, with God as your own. Mm-hmm. And I really think that that's cool. And then you took a break, and it's like, once you have this relationship with God and the Holy Spirit has filled you, mm-hmm. like you really do have this yearning to serve mm-hmm. and to give like Christ did. And so when you got a little bit too comfortable, it started to feel like something was missing. Mm-hmm. And I think that God creates gaps sometimes, like even in creation, he creates these spaces, like he creates water to fill it, and he fills it with these sea animals. Like mm-hmm. he creates spaces to fill them. And so a lot of the times when we have that, I feel like something's missing, it's because God is ready to fill that. Mm-hmm. And it seems like he did that at Andrews with your seminary experience. So that was really cool to hear how God has been working throughout your life. I was wondering for you, leading up to the current position that I think Kristen might ask you to talk about now. My next question would be, what leadership experience have prepared you most for what you're doing now?
I know
because you mentioned a lot of different roles there along the way.
Yes, because I've also I have a special place for WCN. I still have my t-shirt that I rocked. So I was helping, during that time, I think it was like my second or third year, I was serving as the VP for communication. So what Sandra's doing, that was me a couple years back. And honestly, just having that sisterhood, that really helped me out. Working with Mother Hyveth Williams at TGP. And it was funny because I always wanted to be a youth pastor growing up, but it wasn't until I went to Oakwood and I realized that there was a great need for children's pastors. And I said, okay, this could work. So when I got up to Andrews, I was working with Kathy Beagles, Dr. Beagles during that time, and taking some of these classes for my elective. And for some reason, I felt God was leading me to the place of children's ministries. And one of the children's ministries leaders at the Grace Place Church, they were building, they were 6 months in, and one of the leaders said, I need to transition out. So the question was, who's going to be the next children's ministries leader for the Grace Place Church? And all of a sudden, I just felt a pinch from God, and He's like, you. And I was like, no, I'm not ready yet. I have somebody else. I was like, well, they're graduating. It's you. And I was like, no, I'm gonna sleep on it. All of a sudden, I'm like, the meeting's over with, and all of a sudden, I'm right next to Dr. Williams, and I said, hi. And then the word bombing happened. I said, so I want you to know that I'm willing to lead in children's ministries. And then her reaction was, Darnisha! And Dr. Williams, exciting voice, Darnisha! And then she grabbed me and said, thank you. It's like, what I got myself into? And I was like, no, I don't know what to do. So it was actually the Children's Leadership Conference that they have in Andrews through CYE Kids Center. And I was working with one of my good friends, Katrina LaSure. During that time, she was the director for this Kids Center, and I started helping out at that at the conference. I was volunteering, and plus I needed help to be a children's ministry leader. So I connected with one of the former children's ministries leaders from the North American Division, Phyllis Washington, and I got to talk to her, and she was in the process of retiring that year. And all of a sudden, doors started opening. I ended up becoming a presenter for the North American Division while I was still studying at Andrews. So there were times that I would travel and I would teach and I would help others. And I'm like, Lord, I don't know what I'm doing, but I need you to help me. Then we all helped out with the Children's Leadership Conference, getting trainers, getting people equipped. And I think it was that moment that kind of leveraged into my experience, because being a children's ministries presenter, I was going so many places, and that's how I got my first connection. That's how I started networking with other leaders, and even that led me to San Antonio. And though that time was a disappointment, but that was kind of like when the door started cracking open for me to become a pastor. And by God's grace, I'm grateful that I was able to get my position before I was done. So I had a job waiting on me, and that was indeed a God thing, because I wasn't sure if I was even going to get a job after seminary, but God saw fit, and He brought me back to Maryland. And I told my parents, this is a way, are you going to move back to Maryland? I said, listen, unless I'm hired by this conference, by the Chesapeake Conference, and pastor at New Hope, Darnisha will not be in Maryland. I was planning on doing a transitioned into teaching program at Bethel in South Bend. And because I was like, yo, I'm gonna have to live out here. But God saw it fit for me to be hired for Chesapeake Conference and pastor at the New Hope Church.
Oh, wow.
So it was just amazing to me to see how God worked. And, I fasted and prayed. And when I found out that I was going to be interviewed, I started crying. When I was about to start, I started bawling my eyes off, like leaving the library. And I got the message saying, hey, we're introducing you to the church. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I started bawling. I was like crying, like, oh my gosh, God, like all the stuff that I went through in seminary was worth all of this. So I could say just TGP, WCN. Then I was also the vice president for the Black Student Association in the seminary. So that also helped me out as well. And the North American Division, those were like my soul groups, like CYE Kids Center. That has been that's been my way of me leveraging through the leadership experience, just as a pastor. And then even being at New Hope, getting used to the new normal of being a full-time pastor. It was tricky, it was hard, but nevertheless, I owe it all to Chesapeake Conference for taking a chance on this little girl from PG County, Maryland for that.
Yeah. What I love about your story, what really stood out as you're describing your ministry and leadership experience, is how you experienced God pinching you to do children's ministry at the Grace Place, to be the children's pastor. Mm-hmm. And, oftentimes doors are open for us and we can just walk right in. But sometimes God is nudging us to enter into the door that he himself is opening. Mm-hmm. And so I really appreciate that about your story. And Dr. Beth Williams was so happy and so excited to have you in this space. So can you now talk about your current ministry endeavors? You've led us through your experiences, but how are you ministering right now?
So how I'm ministering right now, God moved me to Minnesota. I'm not going to say I moved to Minnesota because God moved me. But it was just, I can say even from my experience, I've had like a Hagar experience. I've dealt with rejection. I've dealt with, feeling like I wasn't qualified. I wasn't cut out to be a pastor. I've dealt with doubts. I had people questioning me. Why do I believe that I was called to be a pastor? And demanded evidence. I've dealt with that. But nevertheless, I was like, okay, maybe I should be a chaplain. And I love, I was like, because I love people. I'm a lover of God and I'm a lover of people. And I just love ministry. I love serving people and serving God. So I did tell God, I said, I know my days are numbered, but if I have to leave my current job for the sake of growth, so be it. Mm-hmm. And things happened and I fasted and prayed and I said, okay, God, I think you need to send me back to children's ministries. Because I was at New Hope, I was overseeing, I was the teens, the college students, and I was the volunteer coordinating pastor at that church, but I was not doing children's ministries and I missed it so much. And I was transitioning out from that position of being a presenter. And I said, God, I really think I need to get back into children's ministries. So I reached out and they said, hey, Minnesota, they're looking for a children's pastor. And I said, Minnesota, you say, eh? Okay, I'm just going to give you my resume. I said, God, if I don't get this job, I will be okay. That was my thing. I was like, God, who lives in Minnesota? Who's out there? I was like, Ellen White was even shipped off from Minnesota to Australia, but that's a different talk. But I went out there and honestly, I felt God God was moving. I didn't even meet my senior pastor, my now senior pastor, Pastor Sean Lee, until I got installed June 1st of last year. So I've only been here for about a year, roughly over a year now. But what I'm doing now is COVID happened, but we are still doing ministry. We are doing virtual Sabbath school for our children and teens. We have a Friday Night Live experience that it's a small teen Bible study group, and our kids are learning about their identity, like finding identity in Christ. We have a virtual living room experience for our younger kids, and we just do story time, and we just have them apply the story principles to their lives and to their parents' lives. And I'm excited to see what God is doing. I've helped just rekindle the women's ministries in a powerful way. We have a prayer in PJs. It's a virtual prayer meeting for moms. And I wanted to do that because I've noticed that whenever I preach, whenever my pastor preaches, whenever a baby is crying at church, guess who has to walk out with the crying baby? It's the mothers. And sometimes I would talk with the moms and they say, hey, I want to hear the sermon, but I have this little one here with me. And I wanted that to be a way for the moms to be able to be filled, to get that time to themselves and to have that connection with God. So I'm grateful that we've been going strong for a year. Along with being a pastor, I have another hat, and I am the Children's Ministries Director for the Minnesota Conference. And I am the baby of the directors of within the North American Division. And I'm just grateful for this experience. I've done formulating an advisory for children's ministries leaders in our church so that they can get the resources needed. And we're working on seminars, and not just only for the conference, but even my church. We kickstarted the Pathfinding Parents seminar. So all the stuff that's being talked about in these seminars is not only for the parents, but also the kids are able to learn some stuff about topics like social media, mental health, like balancing family life and school life and time management, and even finances. That's something that we're working on restarting again because COVID. But I'm just grateful for technology. I'm grateful for what God has done for me. I find myself growing. My senior pastor is a true mentor. He has definitely been an answer prayer, and my leaders are really supportive, and they've been really patient with me as I'm learning the new normal of ministry. And that's just been something I've been working on. And I also have a passion for even mentoring those who are coming up as pastors, whether you're a sister pastor in the making or a brother pastor in the making. I always like helping others because I want something to be, to get the stuff that I wish I had when I was, coming up. Like I didn't really have that much connection, when I was at Oakwood, but it wasn't until seminary that I was just expanded, and I learned to network, and I learned to get out of my comfort zone. And that's something I want to just encourage those to tap into that. And so far, yeah, it has been rather busy.
For sure. There is a lot of ministry going on there. And it's really cool to see that all that is happening during this COVID experience, that God is still moving, God is still working. And you guys heard it right there. She's open to mentoring. So, that's what this platform is for, to get us connected. And so many have shared this idea of, I wish I would have had a mentor. So that is available here. And we're going to go ahead and close this out. I was wondering if you could close it out for us, Pastor Darnisha, with the message of encouragement.
So my encouragement for you all watching today is, like, I had one of my mentors in ministry, Dr. Ivan Williams. It's cool that I have two Williams for pastors, but I just want to encourage y'all that if God has called you, there is a place for you, whether you least expect it. For me, I thought I was going to pastor out in California or Florida, one of the Disney states, but God sent me out to the snow globe capital of the U.S. But nevertheless, God will still bless you. Stay faithful to him. Be kind to yourself. Give yourself grace. And I want to leave with you all with my birth promise. I have a birth promise, and I challenge you all to do the same as well. Just identify your birth date and just look up your passage based on your birth date. My birthday is January 6th, so 1/6. And I want to share with you all a message from Philippians 1:6. And it reads, I am convinced and confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will continue to perfect it and complete it until the day of Christ's return. I know there's a passage, a prophet also mentioned, despise not your small beginnings. Sometimes you might find yourself being a gopher in a church. You might feel like that you're not growing, but be faithful where you are. Be a good steward of where you are and let your work speak for you. People will question you and they'll question your call, but you need to refer back to the time that you said yes to Jesus. And remind yourself that the naysayers and the doubters were nowhere near you when you said yes to Jesus. So remind yourself that God has called you. Remind yourself that you are worthy, you are capable, you are called, and there is evidence. And if you haven't already, get a journal and write out everything that you have done ministry-wise. Even before you became a whole pastor and before you said yes to Jesus, you just write that thing down. Right, and look, so you can look back and say, I am called for this. I had to look back also that I started for the Grace Place. I helped start it Just for Kids program, the children's church experience. And I had to look back at that, even though that was a small beginning for me. I had to remind myself, God did that. And he's going to keep doing that. And God is still faithful. Even if we don't find ourselves faithful, stay prayed up. Ministry will drive you to your knees. Ministry will send you out to your prayer corner, your prayer closet. I have a prayer corner. I got my war area. And I find myself there from time to time. But just remind yourself to just stay true to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Be yourself. Be yourself. So that is my encouragement for you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pastor Darnisha. It's so encouraging to be reminded to be ourselves. I think oftentimes we look at the accomplishments of other women and men and we think, I need to be them to be successful. But what I hear you telling us is to be ourselves, and God has called us to something very specific. And if he called you, he will make a way. And so I just want to thank you again so much for your time and being interviewed. Where can people find you? Where can people reach out to you if they want to network or potentially have you be their mentor?
Well, you can find me on Facebook. I respond to my messenger app. Find me at the Sister Pastor Grams to see more of my journey. Normally on my stories, I talk about just some insights that I got just from my experience in ministry. I have a podcast called The Sister Pastor Speaks. You can also find me, follow my church. God is doing great things at the Southview Seventh-day Adventist Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I'm offering you my church Instagram and my ministry IG. I will respond on Sister Pastor Grams and on Facebook as well. And yeah, stay connected. I would love to hear your stories. I have ladies reaching out to me, little sister pastors and sister chaplains saying, hey, I need a vet. So if you need a vet out about ministry stuff, I will hold space for you.
I appreciate that because sometimes we just need to vent. Yes. Well, thank you again so much. This was the second of our two-part interview with Pastor Anna Bennett. And you just heard from Pastor Darnisha Thomas, children's pastor at Southview SDA. We thank you so much for tuning in. Please tune in next week to hear two more interviews from powerful women in ministry. Until then, take care, please be safe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.